Hello, my YouTube family. Randy C. Watts here. MomoNomo, home of the happy apostate. But post-Mormon activity is not what I'm going to talk about today. Some people may call me crazy. Whether they believe me or not, I honestly don't care. But from the time I was 4 years old, I've been able to, I guess you could call this a special gift, maybe a curse, but I've been able to hear, see, feel the presence of spirits. I have a million stories, and I've been interviewed on several occasions about these stories, but I just want to take my experiences like one at a time and share them with you in different videos. Because if I were to tell you all of my ghostly experiences, of course, it would be an 8-hour video. No one's going to want to sit through that. One of my most prolific experiences having to do with the spirit world was when I lived in Memphis, Tennessee. I was looking for the perfect building to open a day spa. I searched and searched and searched, and finally I found this gorgeous old colonial home that was for lease. It was in a perfect location. The area was partly commercial, partly residential. I had to get some zoning changes, but that looked like the perfect building. So I called the realtor. Her name was Cheryl. And she told me that she would be happy to show me the property if I could meet her Thursday at 3 p.m. Now, I'll never forget that date and time. She explained that there's a few parking places in the back of the house. There's about space for about 4 to 5 vehicles. And so she said, if you'll just pull back there, I'll come and meet you and we'll go through. When I pulled in, I saw a very elderly man of color mowing the beautiful yard and noticed that he kept this landscaping immaculate. I pulled to the back of the driveway, like she'd said, the back of the house. There was about room for 5 vehicles back there. And as I pulled in, I happened to glance up because something caught my attention, and it was a woman who was looking at me from inside the building on an upper floor. So I smiled at her and I waved and I mouthed, "I'll be right there." So I walked to the front of the property where the front door would be so I could go in and meet Cheryl. And this elderly Mr. Henry came walking up to me and he said, "You must be Mr. Randy." And I said, "Well, yes, I am." He said, "Miss Cheryl, she says you were coming, but she ain't here yet." I said, "Oh no, I think she is. She's in the house." He said, "No, ain't nobody in that house." I said, "Well, actually, there is a woman in there. She just was looking at me and I waved to her. And when I waved to her, she turned and she walked to the next window and looked at me again and gave me a wave. So I'm sure that's her." He said, "Ain't nobody in that house." He said, "Mr. Randy," and he got a very serious look on his face. He said, "Is you one that sees?" I said, "I'm sorry?" He said, "Is you one that sees, ghostes?" He said, "My daughter, she sees ghostes." And I said, "Well, actually, I have had a lot of experiences with that, yes." He said, "My daughter." And then Miss Cheryl came pulling into the driveway. She rolled her window down and she says, "Randy." I said, "Cheryl, nice to meet you. There's someone in your house." And she says, "No, there can't be. It's locked up, tight as can be, several alarms, locks. So there's no one in there." I said, "No, no, there really is." She waved at me, parked in back. And I described her. She was medium height. She had a kind of a short bob in her hair, and she was wearing a very lacy cream colored dress. And I described her to her, and she goes, "No, you must have, I don't know what you saw, but there's no one in there." I said, "Well, would you mind if we can go in and I'll show you exactly where I saw her?" She said, "No, let's go on in." It didn't even affect her that I was telling her that there was someone in the house because she just didn't believe me, which so we walked into the house. I I kind of took the lead. I said, "Let me show you where I saw this person." And I made my way towards the back part where the windows were and realized that we were on the first floor because it looked like it was an upper floor, but it's the first floor because it's on a hill and there's steps and all that. So I took her right to the window and I said, "This is the room that she waved. There's my vehicle down there. This is the room where she looked at me." And then she turned and I realized, wait, I was going to tell her that she walked to the next window, but there was a wall between the two windows. But this woman wouldn't have had time to go around a wall. And I said, she walked over to the next window and she waved at me. And Cheryl just chuckled. She says, "Well, I don't know what you were seeing, but there's, you know, we don't have anyone inside here. The alarm would have gone off. The sensors, motion sensors." I said, "Okay." So we went ahead and we looked at the house and I decided that I really wanted it. Part of what I had to do to open my day spa was get a zoning change and just a variance from the current zoning, from residential to commercial. And the home had upstairs with all these beautiful, well, not all these beautiful bedrooms, but about 3 beautiful rooms in there. Everything antique. The floors, the wood floors were original. It was just so pretty. I decided to actually open a bed and breakfast upstairs and a day spa downstairs. Well, Miss Cheryl was all for the idea. But because I was changing the type of zoning, we had to have a meeting with all the neighbors surrounding the property. And these were big, beautiful homes, colonial type style homes. And we set up a meeting and sent out the invitations and all that. And the following week, we walked into this home where she was hosting this meeting. And it was all these Southern Belle widows that were meeting and having tea to talk to us. Most of them had lost their husbands. And I pitched my idea to them and told them what I wanted to open, and they were all for it. And Cheryl chimed in and she says, "I showed Randy the property last week. He said it would be perfect, but he thinks he saw a ghost." And she laughed. And none of the other ladies laughed. They said, "Who did you see?" I said, "I don't know, but," and then I described her and they said, "Oh gosh, that's Miss Dudley. She used to live there when she was alive, and we see her all the time now through the windows. And her husband apparently died of emphysema in one of the upstairs room, and Miss Dudley took her own life in grief, having lost her husband." And they said, "Yeah, we see her frequently." Well, Miss Cheryl was freaked out, and she's like, "No way." And this was her home. Of course, Cheryl had never lived in the house, so she didn't know what went on in there. Well, time went on. I got all the preparations ready and ended up paying the lease, and we got the zoning variance that we needed, and I proceeded to bring in furniture and beautiful antique stuff that wasn't any place there wasn't the furniture I needed for the spa. I needed to get something. But in the parlor where the fireplace was and all that, that was just gorgeous, antique everything. And the day came that we were just about ready to open. But I might add that I hired my employees, obviously, before I opened it. And one of the girls that I hired, she needed to come in Her name was Stephanie. She needed to come in as I was preparing to open and do some, filing, make sure that she had her files set up and things ready to go. She was going to be my front desk receptionist. She was a model. She was beautiful, and I thought she would, really attract those who walked in. And she wasn't doing too much for the couple of weeks that she had to sit in there, and as the contractors came and went. And I told her, I said, look, I don't expect you to do this all the time, but while we're preparing to open, I would like for you to do some light cleaning, dusting. These contractors are making a lot of dust. You'll just dust the areas, the fireplace area, all of that, because otherwise you're just sitting here doing nothing. I would greatly appreciate it. Well, she agreed to do that. It was probably a week before we opened when I got to the spa, which, by the way, I named Eden Day Spa and Bed and Breakfast. When I got there, she was on the back porch crying. And I said, oh my gosh, what's the matter? She says, I quit. I said, wait, why? She said, I can't deal with this. She said, I was dusting the fireplace like you said, and all of a sudden my head yanked back and someone pulled my hair, and I thought it was you joking with me. But nobody was here, and you weren't here. She said, I turned around and I tried dusting again, and the same thing happened, and jerked my head back. She says, I'm not going back in there. And I said, well, I hate for you to quit. Can you just hold off for a few days? She goes, I'm sorry, I can't be here when you're not. I said, okay. So word got out that Eden Day Spa and Bed and Breakfast was about to open up. I had TV and radio commercials going, and people were looking forward to it. And I got a call from a news station who said that they had heard that this place was haunted, and could they come interview me? And I said, sure, we're going to open up in a few days, but come on by. And we set a time. It was an evening appointment. And two news anchors, females, showed up at the property, parked their car back where I had parked my truck. And they came in and they were very excited. One of them said that she was really hoping to get a glimpse of this ghost that we found out was Miss Dudley. And I said, well, be careful what you wish for, because it could happen. But I took them on a tour of the place, and I explained some of the things that had gone on, and we visited for about an hour. One of them said, as they were about to leave, oh, I'm sorry we didn't get to see any ghostly evidence. And I said, yeah, me too. I'm kind of surprised. There was a washing machine and dryer that were placed by the back door. I hadn't plugged them in yet. They were brand new. They had been delivered a couple of days before. And they were set in by the back door. When we went to leave, the washing machine, the heaviest of the two of them, was completely blocking the door. And there was nobody in there but those two news anchors and I. And I said, well, here you go. They said, how did that get here? And how did we not hear that? Because it was just in the next room, in this parlor where we were talking. And I said, this is the kind of stuff that happens. And they're like, oh my gosh. So I struggled to get the washing machine back in place and out of the way of the back door. And by the way, the house was totally locked up as I'm inside with these news anchors. They left, and one of them was all giddy because she had seen evidence of something going on. And as they left, I shut the door behind them and locked it up and went to get my things and go home myself. I heard a knock at the door again, and I went, and it was these two news anchors asking if they could get my help, that something really strange had happened. So I went outside, and this the lady that was driving said, now I'm so careful about locking my vehicle behind me because this is a news vehicle. And the door was locked to the driver's side, but open. I mean, it was like, it wasn't shut. It was open, just a few inches. And she says, how could this even happen? And I said, well, to be honest, it's happened to me twice in my vehicle. I knew how to get the lock slid back, because this is before, they had the fobs in every vehicle. And I fixed their vehicle for them. And she got in and started it up, and the radio was blaring Mexican music. She says, wait, I've never listened to Mexican music in this vehicle. I said, well, that happens to me all the time. Whenever I get back in my vehicle, my radio is playing mariachi Mexican music. So they readjusted that, and they left very happy that they had gotten to see the spa and see the evidence of these strange things. So the exploits of Miss Dudley continued on. After I opened my day spa, she made appearances on a regular basis. She would move things in front of the guests that would come in. They'd be getting their nails done. One lady called for me, the owner, while she was getting her nails done, and she said, I'm really disappointed because I didn't get any kind of ghostly visit from Miss Dudley. And I said, well, I am sorry, because we can't ever, guarantee if that's going to happen or not. Just as she said that, the champagne glass, because we always served chocolate-covered strawberries and champagne to our guests, the champagne glass moved across the desk right to the edge and stopped. Right after she said that. And then the shower came on across the hallway, and there was no one in there. So yeah, these things happened all the time. I was getting some carpet installed in the massage rooms, and these two tough guys came in and said, hey, we're here to install the carpet, but we heard there's ghosts in here. I said, well, yeah, that's actually true. They said, well, if we see that, we're leaving. I said, don't worry, you're going to be fine. And they said, you're going to be here, right? And I said, well, I am. I have to run to the bank, but the place is open for you, and, you come and go as you need. So I ran to the bank, which was only 10 minutes away. When I got back, these two guys were out in the front yard sitting there. And I got out, and they said, dude, how many people are in this building? And I said, there's no one but you guys, He said, well, there's somebody upstairs coughing and hacking and coughing. And I had to explain to them that, our guests hear that too, that stay the night, because the first person that died in the home died of leukemia. I had a system set up. We had a big, beautiful jacuzzi room in the back area of the spa. And when it was time for the people to get out of the hot tub, because they'd sit in there and have champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries, when it was time for them to get out and go to their various treatments, I would ring a bell that I installed that sounded like a bird tweeting, because I wanted everything to go along with the theme of the Garden of Eden. I came in late one night. I was feeling a little jittery because I'm alone. I have to turn the lights on and everything, and I had some office work to do. So I'm sitting in what would be my office down the hallway from this jacuzzi. And all of a sudden, my pager went off, because this was before cell phones. I looked at my pager, and there was nothing there, just all zeros. And I'm like, okay, Miss Dudley, I know you're here. I'm alone. To be honest, I'm not real wild about you doing this stuff at night. Right after I said that, all of a sudden the lights went off. Boom. And the only lights that were on really were in my office. They went off. And just as I'm about to panic, they came back on. And I'm like, Miss Dudley, come on. And then all of a sudden I hear down the hallway those birds tweeting. And guess what? I didn't push the button. So I just packed up my stuff and quietly left and told her I would see her tomorrow. My kids were privy to see the evidence of Miss Dudley. Things being tossed down the stairwell. They would hear the coughing, noises that were just not explained. My massage therapist, one of them, I had actually quite a few therapists that would work there. But one of the massage therapists had her permanent room because she was a full-time employee. And she came in and said hello and went to her room. She came right back out. She says, Randy, what the hell? I said, wait, what do you mean? She said, come look at my room. And I went into her massage room, and the massage table had been completely flipped upside down and was sitting on the top of the table. And all of her books, she had all these anatomy and kinesiology books. And they were all off the bookshelf and stacked up. And I was the only one there, you know. We hadn't had any guests yet in the morning. That was Miss Dudley. She was telling me something. It turned out that massage therapist didn't belong there. She was giving my secrets to the competition because they offered her money to do that. So I wasn't very tickled about that, but Miss Dudley took care of it for me. Just all kinds of experiences. Now that's just one of a bazillion. And like I said, I'll make these videos from time to time. Some of you may say he's just full of crap. I get that. I wouldn't have believed me if I wasn't me, because I'm like, that's just too cliche ghost stuff. But it's real. I don't have to have faith to know that I'm going to live on after this life. I've been blessed enough to see the evidence of a life after this one. How that plays into my belief of God and Jesus Christ and all that, it doesn't really play into that. That's a whole different part of my spirit and soul, which you can learn about on this channel with several of my videos. I just want to advise you of this. If you have any kind of an open mind, if you ever lose a loved one, whether it's a very, very close loved one or a family member, keep your eyes, your ears, and your heart open, because they will send you signs. In my book, Feeling Empty, about overcoming grief, I have a whole chapter called Love Notes from Heaven. And it's all about these experiences that people have had hearing from their departed loved ones. They'll send you signs. It may be a song on the radio. It may be a smell. You may smell their cologne or perfume. It's not your mind playing tricks on you. They want to let you know that they're alive and well. I'll just finish off with this little parable. In my book, Feeling Empty, if you go to, and when I say Feeling Empty, it's FILLING, feelingempty.com. You can order the book if you choose. But one of the stories that I tell about in this book is that there was a colony of water beetles who lived at the bottom of a pond. And they were very happy there. They had this beautiful pond that they lived in. And every now and then, one of the beetles from that community would walk over to a long stem that was going up past the edge of the water, past the surface of the water. And they would crawl up and they'd disappear. The beetles that went up that stalk never came back. One day, this particular beetle felt that compelling feeling that he had to climb that stalk. He didn't know why, but he did. He climbed up that stalk all the way and came out into the sunshine. And he looked around and it was beautiful. And he hopped over onto a lily pad that was floating there. And he fell fast asleep, thinking that he would go back and tell everyone about his experience. When he woke up, he was a beautiful dragonfly. He had wings. He tried them out. He flew around. It was incredible. He could go anywhere. He could do anything. The only thing he couldn't do was fly down under the water and tell his friends and family that he was okay. He's even better now. He wanted to let them know, but he couldn't. I think that's kind of how it is with people. If you have listened to this whole thing, I really appreciate it. That means a lot to me. And there will be more. When you see this background, you'll know that I'm going to tell something about spirit experiences that I've had. They started at 4 years old, and now I'm an old man. 66, to be exact. Yikes. But I have to say that I'm grateful for all these experiences because now I don't fear death quite so much. I'm not real wild about the idea of dying because I love my sweet Amanda and my stepdaughter and my kiddos. But we all got to go. So, and then when we do, it'll be up to me to figure out how to give them signs that I'm alive and well. Anyway, thank you for listening. The holidays are coming up. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. Hopefully 2026 will bring us much better lives than 2025 did. And remember this one point. Grief is the price we pay for love. See ya.